The first gunshot didn't kill anyone. It only reminded the town how close death always stood. Dust hung in the air of Red Hollow like a held breath. The saloon doors were open, even though the sun had already dipped low, spilling amber light across warped floorboards and whiskey-stained tables. The room was crowded with men ranch hands, drifters card-sharps all, drawn here not by the promise of a drink, but by the cold grip of fear. Sheriff Cole Mercer stood near the center, his revolver raised, his jaw set as tight as a singed saddle. Across from him, a man knelt with blood staining his sleeve and heavy iron cuffs on his wrists. Elias Crow, outlaw cattle thief, alleged murderer, and once, long ago, a husband. The piano player had frozen mid-note. Even the bottles lined up behind the bar seemed to be listening. Everyone knew how this was going to end. Red Hollow had put men in the ground for far less. "Stand aside," the sheriff said, his voice steady but laced with a deep weariness. "This ends tonight." Then, a woman's voice cut through the silence. "I won't." It was barely louder than a whisper, but it sliced through the room like a well-honed blade. She stood near the doorway, her black dress brushing the dusty floor. Her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned bone white. Her veil was pulled back, revealing a face the town remembered. It was older now, thinner but unmistakably hers. Anna Crow, the widow. A low murmur rippled through the saloon. Men shifted their boots on the creaking floorboards. Others looked down, suddenly finding the patterns in the wood grain fascinating. Sheriff Mercer's grip on his gun tightened, but he didn't fire. "Anna," he said, his voice slower this time. "You shouldn't be here." She ignored his warning and took one deliberate step forward, then another. Each footfall echoed in the tense silence like a final verdict. "I've buried my husband once already," she said, her voice finding its strength. "I won't bury him again before he's heard." Elias lifted his head, his tired eyes finding hers for the first time in 7 long years. Whatever he had been expecting, fiery anger, cold hatred, or just empty silence, it wasn't this. He saw sorrow in her gaze. Yes, but there was something else, something he hadn't dared to hope for: mercy. The sheriff let out a slow breath through his nose. This man rode with the Black Mesa gang. 3 ranches burned. 1 man dead. "And you know who lit those fires?" Anna replied softly, her words carrying an undeniable weight. "And you know it wasn't him." Silence returned, heavier than before. Red Hollow had a long memory. It remembered the stormy night Elias Crow rode out, chasing down rumors of stolen cattle. It remembered Anna, a silhouette in the window, waiting for days that turned into weeks. And it remembered the letter that came back instead of the man. A short, brutal message. "Don't wait for me." But she'd waited anyway. 7 winters had passed since that night. She learned to run the small boarding house on her own. She learned how to split wood, how to fix a broken hinge, how to ignore the pitying stares and hushed whispers. She had buried her hope, along with her wedding ring, beneath the old cottonwood tree by the creek. The town started calling her the widow because it was easier than admitting they'd all given up on him. Until tonight. Elias coughed, a raw, ragged sound, and fresh blood darkened his sleeve. "Anna, you should go." But she knelt beside him without a moment's hesitation. "No." Sheriff Mercer watched them, his eyes narrowing, his mind racing. He had been a younger man, new to his badge, when Elias rode out. He remembered a good rancher who always tipped his hat, paid his debts on time, and sometimes brought apples to the jail for prisoners who had children. Hat, paid his debts on time, and sometimes brought apples to the jail for prisoners who had children. He also remembered the horrifying discovery of bodies weeks later, and how easily the blame had landed at Elias Crow's boots. And because I won't, again. Anna reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Its edges were worn thin, the creases deep from years of handling. Because this letter, she said, holding it up for all to see, never told the whole truth. The entire room seemed to lean closer, a collective breath held. This was written with the gun to his head, she continued, her voice clear and unwavering. I recognized the handwriting. It wasn't Ilias's. I kept quiet because I was afraid. Afraid of men like you, she said, her gaze sweeping the room, not with malice, but with a weary understanding. Afraid of losing what little peace I had left. Sheriff Mercer's resolve wavered, his gun dipped a fraction of an inch. There's more, Anna said, pressing her advantage. There's a witness. A bitter laugh erupted from a man leaning against the bar. A ghost, maybe, someone muttered into their drink. Just then, the saloon doors creaked open as a gust of wind rushed in, carrying the scent of rain, and with it came a boy. He couldn't have been more than 12, thin as a fence rail, wearing a hat that was far too big for his head. But his eyes were sharp, filled with a kind of watchfulness no child should ever have to carry. He stepped inside, his boots caked with fresh mud, his breath coming in fast, short bursts. I seen it, he said, his young voice cutting through the tension. Every head in the saloon turned toward him. I seen who burned the ranch. I seen who shot Mr. Hollis. Sheriff Mercer lowered his gun another inch, his expression a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. Who are you, son? He asked. The boy looked at Anna first, a flicker of trust in his eyes. Then he looked at Elias. Name's Jonah. He saved me. Elias closed his eyes, a heavy sigh escaping him. The boy swallowed hard, gathering his courage. I been hidin' since, but I ain't hidin' no more. Outside, thunder rumbled over the plains, a low, ominous warning of the storm to come. Sheriff Mercer, finally, slowly, lowered his gun, but he didn't holster it. Bring the boy forward, he commanded, his voice resonating with authority. And God help us all if this is a lie. Anna squeezed Ilias's bound hands, a small, firm gesture of support. For the first time in 7 long years, hope, fragile and tentative, began to breathe again in the suffocating air of the saloon. And somewhere just beyond the lamplit walls, a different kind of storm was Gatharania, storm of truth and lies, of vengeance and justice. One that would decide whether a good man's name could survive the Old West's insatiable hunger for blood. The night was far from over. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of our tale. See you next time. The saloon doors swung open, cutting through the low murmur of whiskey and fear. A boy, no older than 12, stood silhouetted against the raging storm. Rainwater pooled from his worn boots, leaving dark footprints on the dusty floorboards. Every eye in Red Hollow's only saloon turned to him. Some held curiosity, some cruelty, but most held a deep-seated fear of what the truth might cost them. Sheriff Cole Mercer, a man whose face was a roadmap of frontier justice, studied the boy, Jonah. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows like restless spirits. You best be careful, son. The sheriff's voice was low, a gravelly warning. Words have consequences in Red Hollow. Jonah's jaw was tight, his small frame holding a man's burden. I already paid for a woman named Anna. Her grace, a stark contrast to the saloon's grit, placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. He flinched, then leaned into the touch, as if remembering what kindness felt like. From the floor, a man in chains shifted, the soft clink a testament to his guilt. This was Elias Crow, the accused. His gaze was fixed on the floorboards, shame carved into every line on his face. "Tell us," Mercer commanded, his voice leaving no room for refusal. Jonah took a breath that seemed to steal all the air in the room. It was the Black Mesa Gang, just like folks said. But it wasn't Elias Crow who led them. It was Silas Boone. The name landed like a hammer blow. Men muttered, a curse was swallowed. Silas Boone wasn't some common outlaw. He was a businessman, the owner of half the grazing land east of town, a donor to the church roof. He was a man who shook hands with lawmen over fine whiskey. The sheriff's eyes flicked to the bar, to the empty seat where Boone usually held court. "You're saying Boone burned Hollis Ranch and shot its owner?" Mercer's question was sharp, precise. Jonah nodded. "I saw him. He was arguing with Mr. Hollis about the creek. I was hiding in the hayloft. Boone said the land was his now. When Mr. Hollis just laughed at him. The fires came that night. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. And Elias," Mercer pressed. Jonah's gaze dropped. "Elias, he tried to stop them. He fought Boone, told him there were kids on that ranch. Boone pulled a gun on him. That's when Elias shoved me down and screamed at me to run." From his place on the floor, Elias's voice, raw and broken, cut through the silence. "That's enough, boy." Anna turned to him, her own voice firm. "No, it's time." Elias swallowed, the sound loud in the tense quiet. "I didn't come back here to be forgiven," he said, his eyes finding Anna's. "I came back to make it right," Boone told me. "He said if I didn't take the blame, he'd hunt you down. Said widows don't live long out here without protection." A collective gasp rippled through the saloon. "I left to draw him away from you," Elias continued, his story spilling out like a confession. "Tried to gather proof, but his reach, it's everywhere. I was caught, tortured, shot. They left me for dead." He looked at the boy. "Found him half-starved near the canyon. I couldn't just leave him." Anna's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "You should have trusted me," she whispered, the words a mix of love and heartache. "I was afraid," Elias admitted, "and cowards don't get happy endings." Sheriff Mercer turned away, rubbing his jaw. He'd worn his badge for too long not to recognize the stench of a lie, especially one paved with gold. Boone's money had smoothed over too many rough roads in this town. "Where is Boone now?" he asked Jonah. "At his ranch," the boy answered immediately. "Guards posted everywhere. He's waiting to hear that Elias was hanged." The word hanged echoed like a death knell. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking dust from the rafters. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof like 1,000 galloping hooves. Mercer's hand went to his pistol, but he didn't draw it. "If this is true," he said slowly, speaking to the whole room, "then this town's been living on a lie." A man by the door spat onto the floor. "Or the sheriff's gone soft." Mercer's gaze was like flint, or the law's finally catching up. He turned back to Anna. "You understand what this means. Boone won't come quietly." "I know," she said, her voice unshakable. But neither did my husband. The sheriff gave a single, decisive nod. I'll ride out. Elias strained against his chains. Take me with you. No, you're in no shape to fight. Elias lifted his chin, a fire igniting in his tired eyes. Then you'll need a witness who knows Boone's men, and I won't hide again. The sheriff hesitated for a long moment. Then, with a click that sounded louder than thunder, he unlocked the cuffs. It was a small sound, but it changed everything. As Elias stood, weak but resolute, the saloon doors burst open again. A rider, soaked to the bone, and wild-eyed stumbled inside. "Sheriff," he yelled, "it's Boone's men. They're riding this way, armed for a war." The room exploded. Chairs scraped, guns were drawn. Mercer swore, "He's coming to finish it." Anna grabbed Ilias's hand, their fingers lacing together. "Then we stand." A flash of lightning lit up the saloon, illuminating faces caught between fear and a newfound resolve. The storm had finally arrived, not just the one outside, but the one that had been brewing in the heart of Red Hollow. And this time, there would be no riding away. Thanks for watching. If you love stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. The first shots came with the rain. Gunfire cracked across Red Hollow's main street, sharp and sudden, shattering the night like breaking glass. Horses screamed in panic. Men shouted, their voices swallowed by the rising storm. Inside the saloon, lanterns swayed violently as bullets punched through wood and shattered windows. Sheriff Cole Mercer stepped into the doorway, his long coat flaring in the wind. His badge caught a flash of lightning, a momentary glint of silver in the chaos. "Lawmen with me," he roared over the thunder, but only a few stepped forward. The rest of the townsfolk watched from the shadows, frayed, uncertain, frozen in a moment that would define them. They were finally being forced to choose what kind of town they wanted to be. Elias Crow, the man at the center of it all, moved to stand beside the sheriff. He was pale from his ordeal, but he stood upright, his gaze fixed on the street. Behind them, Anna stood in the doorway, one hand resting on her son Jonah's shoulder, the other gripping the doorframe like it was the last solid thing in the world. At the head of a posse of hired guns, Silas Boone rode forward, rain streaking his fine coat. He raised his pistol high, a cold, confident smile on his face. It was the smile of a man who believed money had already won the fight. "Step aside, Sheriff," Boone called out, his voice dripping with arrogance. "That outlaw is mine." Sheriff Mercer's voice was like stone, carrying through the storm. "Not tonight." Boone laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think this town will back you? Look around, Sheriff." Mercer did. And for a long, heavy moment, no one moved. The silence was thick with fear and indecision. Red Hollow held its breath. Then, a sound broke the tension. The bartender set down his shotgun on the bar with a thud and stepped out into the rain. Then a ranch hand, his face grim. Then the piano player, his hands shaking, but his eyes resolute. One by one, the people of Red Hollow stood. They chose their side. Boone's smile faltered, his confidence cracking. "You burned ranches," Mercer said, his voice rising with righteous fury. "You murdered Hollis, and you framed Elias Crow for your crimes." Boone's eyes hardened. "Proof. You have no proof." "Me," a small voice cut through the noise. Jonah stepped forward from behind his mother, out into the rain. He was the proof. He was the witness. Enraged, Boone raised his gun, aiming it directly at the boy. But Elias moved faster than thought. He threw himself in front of Jonah, arms spread wide, completely unarmed, the rain washing blood and dust from his torn coat. "It ends with me," he said, his voice steady, like it was always meant to. "Elias." Anna cried out his name, a sound of pure terror. A shot rang out. Elias staggered, a pained grunt escaping his lips, but he did not fall. Boone's bullet had torn through his shoulder. Before Boone could fire again, Sheriff Mercer's gun cracked. The sound was definitive. Boone screamed as he fell from his horse, his cry swallowed by the rain as he landed in the mud. The fight ended as quickly as it had begun. Seeing their leader fall, Boone's men fled into the dark, melting away like ghosts. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a clean, washed world. Silas Boone was bound and bleeding, his ledgers seized, his web of crimes laid bare for all to see. The truth spread through Red Hollow faster than any fire ever had. Elias survived, but just barely. He lay in a bed at the boarding house, pale against the white sheets. Anna was beside him, her hand wrapped tightly around his, just like it had been all those years ago, before everything went wrong. Jonah slept peacefully on a blanket on the floor, finally safe, finally unafraid. Sheriff Mercer entered the room and quietly removed his hat. "The charges are cleared, Elias," he said softly. "You're a free man." Elias's tired eyes found Anna's free. "If you'll have me," he whispered. Tears she had held back for so long finally fell down her cheeks. "I never stopped," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. In the weeks that followed, Red Hollow began to change. Not all at once, but enough. The saloon's piano played cheerful tunes again. Children's laughter echoed in the streets. Jonah went to school, a book in his hand instead of fear in his heart. Elias found new purpose, mending fences instead of breaking them, his hands rebuilding what had been torn apart. One afternoon, Anna went to the cottonwood tree at the edge of her property, right to the spot where she deburied her wedding ring in a moment of despair. She dug it up, wiped the dirt away, and placed it back on her finger. It belonged there. On a quiet evening, as the setting sun bled gold and orange across the plains, Sheriff Mercer tipped his hat to Elias. "You taught this town something important," he said, a note of respect in his voice. Elias just shook his head and glanced toward Anna. "Anna did," he corrected. The sheriff nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Maybe mercy's just another kind of law." That night, the saloon doors stayed open late, its lanterns glowing warm and welcoming against the approaching dark. And when Anna spoke, the world around her listened, not in fear, but in hope. Because this story reminds us that sometimes, in the heart of the Wild West, true justice doesn't come from the barrel of a gun. It comes from the courage of a widow who refused to stay silent, and a community that finally learned to stand together. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of the untamed frontier. We'll see you next time.